I want to start today by taking you to a specific spot on the map, because the geography here, it tells the story almost as well as the words do.
Okay.
So you're standing on the crest of the Mount of Olives. It's late in the day. The sun is setting behind Jerusalem. And the view... Honestly, it sounds less like a city and more like a hallucination of wealth.
It really was the crown jewel of the East at that point.
Yeah.
If you look at the historical records, especially Josephus, he describes the temple as a mountain of snow.
That's the image that stuck with me. The marble was so white, so massive, that from a distance it just looked like a snow-capped peak. And then you add the gold.
Right, the gold plating. Josephus actually wrote that when the sun hit those gold plates, you physically couldn't look at it.
It would blind you.
Yeah. It was designed to project this sense of, invincibility.
So you have this blinding, indestructible symbol of national pride. And then you have the man standing on the ridge opposite it, Jesus. And the context here implies this is probably right around the triumphal entry.
So down below, the crowds are shouting, Hosanna.
They're waving palm branches, they're ready to crown him king. It should be the absolute highest moment of his ministry.
The coronation moment. But when he looks at that magnificent city, he breaks down.
And we're not talking about a single, polite tear rolling down the cheek, are we?
No. The word used in the original language and the chapter we're covering today, the destruction, it emphasizes a convulsing, body-shaking sob. It's true agony.
And that's the hook, isn't it? It pulls you into this whole narrative. Why is the king crying at his own coronation?
Right. If you didn't know the backstory, you'd assume he was crying for himself. He knows what's coming.
Gethsemane is just a few nights away. The trial, the cross.
But that's the twist. He isn't crying for himself. In fact, later on, when he's actually on the way to the cross, he tells the women of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, weep for yourselves.
So his grief here on the Mount of Olives, it's entirely selfless.
Completely. He's looking at this marble and gold fortress, and he sees it burning.
That's the tragedy that turns this from just a history lesson into something deeply devotional for me. It's that hen and chicks analogy.
Oh, it's one of the most tender metaphors in all of Scripture. How often I wanted to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you were not willing.
You have to think about what that implies about the character of God.
We do. We usually think of God in terms of power, law, thunder.
But here, he frames himself as a mother bird, just trying to shield her vulnerable young from a storm.
And the tragedy isn't that the mother bird failed, it's that the chicks refused to come in.
Exactly. It's the tragedy of unrequited love. The chapter makes a compelling point that for over 1,000 years, God's favor had been on this one specific place.
He sent prophets, he sent warnings, blessings. It was his vineyard.
Yeah.
And finally, he sends his son.
And instead of acceptance, there's this stubborn, hardened rejection. You were not willing. That phrase it haunts me.
It should, because it shifts the responsibility. The destruction that's coming, and Jesus sees it so clearly, it isn't something God wants to inflict. It's something the people are choosing.
They're pushing away the protective wing.
They are.
Let's talk about what he actually saw. Because while the disciples are looking at these sturdy walls thinking this will last forever, Jesus is having what the chapter calls a vision of doom.
It's like a split-screen experience. The disciples see present glory. Jesus sees future ruin. He sees the Roman legions.
Which at this point were just a political nuisance.
Right. But he sees them becoming this overwhelming flood. He sees the destroying angel hovering over the city. He hears the footsteps of soldiers, the crackle of fire, and the cries of the starving.
And he says something that must have sounded like absolute madness to everyone there. He points to these massive stones. Some of them were the size of small train cars, and says, "Not one stone shall be left upon another."
To the Jewish mind, that was basically saying the world is ending. The temple wasn't just a building, it was the anchor of their reality.
So if the temple falls, the universe itself must be dissolving.
Pretty much. And this leads to that confusing moment where the disciples ask him, when will these things happen? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?
They just mashed two huge events together.
And this is where our deep dive really happens. Because Jesus answers them, but he doesn't immediately untangle their confusion. He gives a dual prophecy. He answers both questions at once.
So he describes the events leading to the fall of Jerusalem in 70 AD, But he uses language that looks forward through time to the end of history itself.
Exactly.
But why? Why do that? Why not just say, okay, first the city falls in about 40 years, and then much, much later, the world ends?
Because the pattern is the same. That's the key insight. Jerusalem is a microcosm.
A type or a symbol.
Precisely. The spiritual dynamics that led to the fall of that city, the rejection of light, the hardening of the heart, the breakdown of society, are the exact same dynamics that will play out globally at the end of time.
So by warning them about one, he was warning all of us about the other.
That's the idea.
I want to dig into the mechanism of this destruction, because I think a lot of us struggle with the idea of a loving God being associated with such a violent event.
It's a crucial theological distinction. The text is very clear that God does not stand as the executioner.
So it's not God got angry and smashed the city.
No, it's much more nuanced. The argument is that God's law, his spirit, they act as a shield. It's like a containment field against chaos.
So the protection isn't just about stopping foreign armies, it's about restraining evil itself.
Right. It restrains the worst impulses of the human heart, and it restrains the power of Satan, who the text frames as the real destroyer.
Okay.
But, and this is key, God values our free will. So if a nation or an individual just stubbornly says, go away, we don't want you, we don't want your laws, eventually, he respects that choice.
He steps back.
He withdraws. And that is the terrifying part. He doesn't have to strike a blow. All he has to do is remove his hand of protection.
And the containment field drops.
It drops. And then the forces of evil, both human passions and, satanic influence, they just flood in to fill that vacuum.
So the destruction of Jerusalem was the result of the nation losing its divine defense because they pushed the defender away.
Precisely. They chose a murderer Barabbas over the Prince of Life. So in the end, they were left to the control of the one they had chosen. The chapter calls it satanic control.
And that brings us to the actual siege. Because before the final horrible end, there was this incredibly strange historical event. Cestius Gallus. It reads like a suspense thriller that it doesn't make any sense.
The Cestius anomaly, this is one of those moments where history and prophecy just intersect perfectly.
So set the scene for us. It's 66 AD, right?
Yeah, 66 AD. The Jews have revolted. Cestius Gallus marches down with the 12th Legion. He surrounds Jerusalem. He even breaches the lower city and is undermining the temple wall.
He has him. It's checkmate.
Total checkmate. The rebels inside are panicking. They're ready to surrender. And then Cestius does the unthinkable.
Without any apparent reason, as the text says.
Without any reason. He just sounds a retreat, turns around and leaves.
Imagine being on that wall. You think you're dead, and the enemy just walks away.
It made zero military sense. Historians still debate it. But for the Christians inside Jerusalem, they didn't care about military logic. They cared about the spiritual signal.
Because Jesus had given them a very specific sign.
He had. He told them, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, and when you see the abomination of desolation standing in the holy place, which was the Roman standards, their flags with their idols,
then know that its desolation is near, and his command was urgent: flee.
get out. Don't even go back for your coat.
But that's the paradox. How do you flee a city that's surrounded? You can't.
You can't. They were watching for a sign that required a miracle to act upon. They saw the sign, the Romans on holy ground, but they were trapped. And then, suddenly, Cestius retreats.
The trap opens.
For a moment, and this is where the story splits, you have two groups of people seeing the exact same event and interpreting it in completely different ways.
The Jewish military forces see it as a sign of weakness.
Yes, they think, we've won. God is with us. They chase after Cestius, attack his rear guard, and they come back to Jerusalem singing, thinking the city is invincible.
While the Christians
knew better. They knew this wasn't a victory, it was a window. While the city was celebrating and the gates were unguarded, they grabbed their families and ran.
to a place called Pella.
Yes, across the Jordan River. And here is the statistic that just floors me every single time.
Not a single Christian perished in the destruction of Jerusalem.
Not one. Because they listened. They watched. And when that impossible window opened, they didn't hesitate.
It's an incredible lesson in spiritual alertness. The world around them was shouting peace and safety.
But they knew sudden destruction was coming. And it did come. The window slammed shut.
Titus returns.
Yep, the Romans came back under Titus. And they weren't messing around. They besieged the city, and tragically they did it right at Passover. Millions of pilgrims were packed inside the walls.
We talked earlier about the withdrawal of protection and what humanity looks like without God. The descriptions of what happened inside those walls, it's the stuff of nightmares.
It is. The famine was so severe that all natural affection just vanished. The text describes wives stealing food from husbands, children snatching it from their aged parents.
It mentions people chewing on their belts, their sandals.
Even the leather on their shields. It was a total moral and social collapse. And it wasn't just the hunger, it was the infighting. 3 different factions fighting for control inside the city while the Romans were outside.
They burned each other's food supplies.
They did. They basically committed suicide by civil war before the Romans even breached the final wall. It's a perfect picture of what happens when that restraining spirit is gone. Society eats itself.
And finally, the temple, the very building Jesus wept over. You said earlier the Romans didn't even plan to destroy it.
No, not at all. Titus was a sophisticated general. He admired the temple. He wanted to preserve it as a trophy. He gave strict orders not to touch the sanctuary.
But you can't stop a prophecy with a general's order.
You really can't. During the chaos of the final assault, a soldier just snatching up a blazing brand threw it through a golden window.
And the cedar wood just caught instantly.
Titus rushed in. He was shouting, waving his sword, trying to get his soldiers to put the fire out. But they caught up in the passions of war, as the book calls it, and in greed.
The gold.
All that gold plating on the walls melted and ran down between the giant stones.
And that explains the final literal detail of the prophecy.
Yes. To get the gold, the soldiers had to pry the stones apart with crowbars. They dismantled the temple rock by rock. So when the dust settled, just as Jesus had predicted, not one stone was left upon another.
It's just chilling how literal it was. Over 1 million people dead. It's such a heavy story.
It is. But we have to pivot back to the why. Why revisit this? The book insists this isn't just history, it's a warning.
The microcosm idea.
Right, Jerusalem is the mirror. The chapter argues that the world today is heading toward a similar crisis. We're seeing the same rejection of God's law, the same passions bubbling up.
But the thing that alerts me is the attitude of the people before the fall. They weren't panicking, they were confident.
They were indifferent. And that's the danger. The text says the world is being lulled into a false security. We're focused on business, pleasure, progress.
We look at our skyscrapers, our technology, just like they looked at the temple and think, we are too big to fail.
It's the Cestius moment all over again, seeing a temporary reprieve and thinking it's a permanent victory. The devotional takeaway is to not let the noise of the world drown out the warnings of love.
Because that's what prophecy is. It's a warning from a lover who doesn't want to lose you.
Exactly.
That brings us back to the tears. The destruction is described as God's strange act.
Yes, Isaiah calls it his strange act. It's foreign to his nature. He is a creator, not a destroyer. The whole point of this chapter is that God provided a way of escape for everyone who wanted it.
The Christians in Pella were safe not because they were better people,
but because they trusted the word of the Master. They believed the warning more than they believed their eyes.
That's a beautiful way to put it. They trusted the warning more than the apparent reality of that victory.
And today, the call is the same. To trust the words of Christ more than the apparent security of our civilization.
It really changes how you see the end times. It's not about fear-mongering. It's about recognizing the protector wants to gather us in.
He wants us under the wing. That's the safest place in the universe. If you're there, it doesn't matter if the walls fall.
You know, as we wrap this up, that image of Jesus on the mountain, it's just a really provocative thought to end on.
It is. The author kind of poses this question implicitly. If Jesus were to stand on a high mountain today, overlooking New York or London, or just your own home, what would he see?
Would he see the magnificent buildings and be impressed?
I doubt it. The real question is, would he see a people who are watching? Would he see us listening for his voice? Or would he be standing there as the sun sets, weeping for us, just like he wept for Jerusalem?
That is a question that I think we all need to just sit with for a minute. It's a call to check our own hearts.
And remember, his tears prove he's on our side. He wants to save. The escape route is open. We just have to be willing to take it.
Thank you for walking us through this. It was heavy, but I feel, more awake.
That's the goal, awake and hopeful.
Thanks for listening to The Steep Dive. We'll catch you next time.